Hi everyone, this is Howard Richmond from Golf Course Management Magazine. I'm the associate editor. We're inside the shop here with Dr. Eric Miltner. We're going to talk a little bit about a new way to look at your fertilizer investment. We're going to ask you a few questions, Doctor. Thanks for being here for us. We appreciate it.
Sure. Hi, Howard. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We talk a little bit about some of the factors the superintendent should consider when they're choosing a fertilizer. What goes into all that?
Yeah, well, like anything in their management program, there's lots of things they need to think about. With fertilizers, agronomic response, how the plant's going to respond to that is one. Environmental fate of nutrients, that's becoming much, much more important, especially in a lot of states with increasing regulations. And then we have to think about things like, budget is always a big consideration. And so I think it's important for superintendents to, and we're talking about granular fertilizers in particular here, understand what's in that bag of fertilizer they're buying, and make sure that everything in there is something that's bringing value to their golf course, to their operation. If it's some kind of a slow release product, understand how that works, what the longevity is, and make sure that they're getting what they need and not paying for things that they don't need.
Yeah, budget, obviously, it's kind of always a consideration as much now as ever, it seems like. But are there potential pitfalls of buying based on just the price alone?
Yeah, I would say that depends on the use, and I think it's kind of like anything. I'm a big believer in the old adage of you get what you pay for, right? And I think in some cases, if you're, say, spraying a quick release soluble source for spoon feeding, you can use something that's relatively inexpensive, and that's going to be pretty productive and pretty effective. But if you're going beyond that, if you're looking something that's sort of longer term, and you want to take advantage of that to sort of positively impact your operations and budget, a fertilizer like that, it might cost more per bag on a bag basis, but in the long run, that really might be a good money-saving practice.
Right. Okay. Great. Koch, Turf, and Ornamental, they offer a variety of enhanced efficiency fertilizers, or EEFs. Can you explain what EEFs are?
Sure. So it's a relatively new term that a lot of people might not be familiar with yet, but there are a lot of EEFs that have been around for a long, long time. And in a nutshell, what enhanced efficiency fertilizer means is a fertilizer that increases plant nutrient uptake and decreases loss to the environment, compared to something just like urea. So there are a lot of different ways to make those kind of products. There's slow release fertilizers that have been around for a long time, like sulfur coated products or methylene urea formaldehyde. Everybody's familiar with those. Controlled release fertilizers, also known as polymer coated. Mm-hmm. And then sort of the relatively new kid on the block, stabilized nitrogen fertilizers, and they've been around now for about 15 years, so they're not that new. And these contain urease inhibitors that prevent volatilization, loss to the atmosphere, or nitrification inhibitors that just help keep that nitrogen in a form that stays in the soil and is available longer for plant uptake.
At the Koch booth, there's a lot of talk about cost per day of green. Can you walk us through that concept?
Yeah, so when you get into these slow release and controlled release type products, whether that's a methylene urea or sulfur coated or polymer coated product, they can be built in a lot of different ways. They could last anywhere from maybe 6 weeks to even up to 6 months. So the idea of cost per day of greening is, you have a bag of fertilizer, you have some choices, and you know what that fertilizer costs. So if you understand how long it's going to last, if it's a fertilizer that's going to last 2 months versus a fertilizer that's going to last 6 months, you can take that bag cost, figure out how much you're going to have to apply over your golf course, how long it's going to last, mm-hmm. and do some fairly simple math to figure out it's going to cost me, X dollars per acre per day to provide that nutrition that's going to keep my turf green, playable, and healthy. So, and in a general sense, and it depends on the particular fertilizer and how it's built, but there could be some real advantages to provide to using a fertilizer that lasts a long time. It might actually be the lowest cost in the long run, depending exactly on the fertilizer. And then you can kind of look beyond that to some other sort of intangibles like labor allocation, fuel, equipment usage, wear and tear, those kind of things. And there's a lot of things that can be sort of rolled into that equation of how a particular fertilizer impacts their budget and their operation.
Okay, thank you. Well, what additional advantages come from an increased fertilizer longevity?
What additional advantages?
Correct.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the other things with enhanced efficiency fertilizers, in addition to longevity, is because, meeting the definition, increased uptake, reduced loss to the environment, they're used more efficiently, so more nutrition gets into the plant. That's number one. So, if you're using urea, maybe 50% of that is getting into the plant. If you're using one of these enhanced efficiency products, that number might be 60, 70% or more. And we've put a lot of resources into doing that research and kind of documenting that efficiency for our products. So that's one of them. The other thing is when you look at a slower controlled release product that's going to release nutrients for a fairly long time, it's going to release those nutrients fairly steadily. And you're going to avoid some of those feast and famine cycles if you're using quick release soluble products, where we would tend to see uptake curves that look like that with repeat applications. But if you use a slower controlled release product, you're going to get a much more smoother uptake curve. And think about what that does for the plant nutritionally. It's no different than for you and me. If we provide that constant nutrition, the plant's going to be healthier. It's going to tolerate all kinds of environmental stresses better, whether it's weather stress or weed competition or pathogenic fungi or all those kind of things. We provide that nice, consistent nutrition. It's going to be good for the plant in the long term.
One final question for you. How can someone determine if EFs are in a fertilizer blend, and what should they look for on the fertilizer label?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, reading the label is key, just like it is with a pesticide, reading the label and understanding that. And in particular, when you look on your fertilizer label, you look down in that area that says the guaranteed analysis. And it's going to start to break down exactly what those nutrients are. So under the percent nitrogen, you might see words like water-insoluble nitrogen. And that would be an indication that there's maybe a urea formaldehyde or natural organic type nitrogen source in there. You'll see other water-soluble nitrogen, and that kind of goes along with that urea formaldehyde or methylene urea type technology. And then if you kind of look farther down under the derived from statement, it tells you exactly what are the materials that are delivering the nutrition that went into that bag. And if there's coated products in there, you'll see things like, it'll read polymer-coated, sulfur-coated urea, or polymer-coated urea. Or if it's a stabilized nitrogen product, it'll say something like urea stabilized with NBPT or DCD, which are the two inhibitors we use to make those products. So just a careful reading of the label, you'll understand the technology that's in there. You have to go a little bit deeper to figure out how much, but I think most superintendents understand how to do that. And if you have questions, talk to your sales rep. Find out exactly what goes into that bag of fertilizer, how it's built, and what those components are going to do for you. But I think in this day and age, with budgets that are ever challenging and the environmental pressures, incorporating more enhanced efficiency fertilizers into your program it's going to benefit you all the way around.
Well, thanks for being inside the shop, Dr. Eric Miltner, research agronomist from Koch Turf and Ornamental.
Thanks a lot,
Have a
Howard.
great
Good
time.
to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.